Special Counsel John Durham finally showed up to Congress and explained his report, and he caught a lot of grief from a lot of people. One, of course, is Adam Schiff, who is now censured. What a total loser. Who gets censured? He got censured, of course, because he's a corrupt partisan hack. John Durham's opening statement, where he explains exactly what he investigated and, more importantly, what he found. Here's what it sounded like.
Good morning, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, and members of this committee. As the committee knows, on May 13th, 2019, Attorney General Barr directed me to conduct a preliminary review into certain matters related to federal investigations concerning the 2016 presidential election campaigns. That review subsequently developed into several criminal investigations and gave rise to my subsequent appointment as special counsel in these matters. Many of the most significant issues documented in the report that we have written, including those relating to lack of investigative discipline, failure to take logistical, logical investigative steps, and bias, are relevant to important national security interests that this committee and the American people are concerned about. If repeated and left unaddressed, these issues could result in significant national security risks and further erode the public's faith and confidence in our justice system.
Yeah, further. Going to be a lot harder
As we said in the report,
than they're already doing.
Our findings were sobering. I can tell you, having spent 40 years plus as a federal prosecutor, they were particularly sobering to me. A number of my colleagues who spent decades in the FBI themselves, they were sobering. While I'm encouraged by some of the reforms that have been implemented by the FBI, the problems identified in this report, anybody who actually reads the report and the details of the report, the documented portions of the report, I think would find that the problems identified in the report are not susceptible to overnight fixes.
Yeah, so the FBI claiming it's all been resolved is
they cannot
nonsense.
be addressed solely by enhancing training or additional policy requirements.
What is it? Defund
Rather,
them?
what is required is accountability.
Defunding
both
them.
in terms of the standards to which our law enforcement personnel hold themselves and in the consequences they face for violation of laws and policies of relevance. I'm here to answer your questions. I appreciate the opportunity to. I'll answer them to the best of my ability, and I hope to be of service to your oversight function. As I'm sure you know, the Department of Justice has issued some guidelines as to what I'm authorized to discuss and those things that I am not authorized to discuss. In this regard, accordingly, I'll refer principally to the report. I do want to emphasize a few points at the outset, however. First, I want to emphasize in the strongest terms possible that my colleagues and I carried out our work in good faith, with integrity and in the spirit of following the facts wherever they lead without fear or favor. At no time and in no sense did we act with a purpose to further partisan or political ends. To the extent that somebody suggests otherwise, that's simply untrue and offensive.
Well, you're going to get a lot of that today, John.
Second, the findings set forth in this report are serious and deserve attention from the American public and its representatives. Let me just briefly highlight a few of those. For one, we found troubling violations of law and policy in the conduct of highly consequential investigations directed at members of a presidential campaign and ultimately a presidential administration. To me, it matters not whether it was a Republican campaign or a Democratic campaign. It was a presidential campaign. Our team comprised dedicated and experienced prosecutors and law enforcement agents who worked day in and day out through the entire COVID epidemic in the office trying to interview people, all in an effort to try to get to those facts.
Yes, I know. You get a lot of great work, a lot of hard.
Who cares about our civil liberties.
Yes, got it.
A FISA order of surveillance of a United States citizen, which in our view is a significant problem.
Yeah, it is significant.
Several of the relevant FISA applications at issue in the Crossfire investigation omitted references to what was clearly relevant and highly exculpatory information that should have been disclosed to the FISA court.
So they got warrants on fake information, and they didn't include in the warrants information that would have proved the opposite of what they were claiming. They're claiming somebody is guilty. They have information in their possession that they know shows that person is in fact innocent, and they withheld that information from the judge.
Multiple FBI personnel who signed or assisted in preparing renewal applications for that same FISA warrant acknowledged that they did not believe that the target, Mr. Page, was a threat to national security, much less a knowing agent of foreign power, which is what the law requires. It appears from our investigation that the FBI leadership dismissed those concerns. Another aspect of our findings concerned the FBI's failure to sufficiently scrutinize information it received or to apply the same standards to allegations it received about the Clinton and Trump campaigns. As our report details, the FBI was too willing to accept and use politically funded and uncorroborated opposition research, such as the Steele dossier.
Funded by Clinton's
The FBI
people.
relied on the dossier and FISA applications, knowing that it was likely material originating from a political campaign.
Yep, knowing
opponent.
it was Clinton's fake
It
garbage.
did so even after the President of the United States, the FBI and CIA directors and others received
Obama.
briefings about intelligence suggesting that there was a Clinton campaign plan underway to stir up a scandal tying Trump to Russia.
Obama, Comey, everybody knew that there was an attempt to create a fake hoax, and they ran with it anyways.
The accuracy of the intelligence was uncertain at the time, but the FBI failed to analyze or even assess the implications of the intelligence in any meaningful way.
Because
when the
it served
FBI
their
learned that the
narrative.
primary source of information for the Steele dossier, which was basically the guts of the narrative about there being a well-coordinated conspiracy involving Trump and the Russians, when they learned that Danchenko was the primary subsource for those reports, it was at a time when the FBI already knew that Danchenko himself had previously been the suspect of an FBI espionage investigation. He's suspected of being a Russian asset.
Wow.
And nonetheless,
So they were very mad at Trump for colluding with the Russians, but guess what? The people who wrote the Christopher Steele dossier, Christopher Steele sourced through Igor Danchenko, was a Russian asset. So they're getting their fake information from Russia to try to blame Trump for being in bed with the Russians. You see how insane this is? And they got away with it. Nobody's been prosecuted or criminal or convicted for any of this stuff.
they signed him up as a paid informant without further investigation
No, because they
of that
needed him.
espionage concern,
They're
to
just
say
getting
nothing of
characters for their
resolving that
fiction that they
espionage
can
matter
go out and
before
play in
using
the world.
Danchenko and Danchenko's information. And when the FBI and Special Agent Mueller's office learned that Steele's primary subsource likely had gathered important portions of the dossier information during travels to Russia with one Charles Dolan, it inexplicably decided not to interview Dolan or investigate his activities. Finally, I would like to add that although our work exposed deep concerns concerning facts about the conduct of these investigations, our report should not be read to suggest in any way that Russian election interference was not a significant threat. It was. Nor should it be read to suggest that the investigative authorities at issue no longer serve important law enforcement and national security interests. They do.
Yeah, but what does that
Rather,
have to do with
responsibility
Trump?
for the failures and transgressions that occurred here rests with the people who committed them or allowed them to occur. Again, to my mind, the issues raised in the report deserve close attention from the American people and their elected representatives here in Washington.
All right, well, we'll see if they give it any attention. So thank you for your opening statement there, John. Now, here is what Jim Jordan had to say in response to this. And as we talked about here many times, this is the document that the House GOP has shared. We see that they allege that the Kremlin was working with Charles Dolan, working with Igor Danchenko, who was the FBI informant that they paid. He helped generate the Steele PP tape dossier, went to Christopher Steele. Fusion GPS was hired as an expert outsourced company to work with the law firm called Perkins Coie. They got the data from Christopher Steele, worked its way back over to Mark Elias and Michael Sussman. They fed it, the dossier, to the FBI and to the media, the Clinton campaign, and posted that on the internet and said, hey, Trump's colluding with the Russians. Scientists have figured it out with the secret Yoda phones and all the stuff. And it was all fake. All of it was fake. The media ran with it. Michael Sussman got tried and acquitted on this because it happened out of DC and a juror said they got bigger things to worry about. The FBI was employing at that moment James Baker, who left and worked with Twitter after this fact and before Elon caught him and had to fire him out of there. Giant thing is a giant intelligence op, and they colluded to do it. When Trump won, they needed something that was going to keep him under their thumb. They always need leverage over the guy. So impeachment 1 started out of this giant fiction. Now, we read through the Durham report here. I actually was quite disappointed with it. I mean, we wanted some conclusions and some action, and he gave us a nice big book report. But here is what Jim Jordan, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, had to say when he got his turn at questions with Durham.
Mr. Durham, in the summer of 2016, did our government receive intelligence that suggested Secretary Clinton had approved a plan to tie President Trump to Russia?
Yes.
Was that intelligence important enough for Director Brennan to go brief the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, the Attorney General of the United States, and the Director of the FBI?
Yes.
And was that intelligence put then into a memorandum, a referral memorandum?
Yes.
And was that memorandum then given to Director Comey and Agent Strzok?
That's who it was addressed to, yes.
Did Director
Comey
Comey
and
share
Strzok.
that memorandum with the FISA court?
I'm sorry, can
Did
you?
he share that memorandum with the FISA court? Did Director Comey do that?
I'm not aware of that if he did,
Did he share it with the lawyers preparing the FISA application?
not to my knowledge.
Did he share it with the agents on the case, working the Crossfire Hurricane case?
No.
Didn't share it with the agents on the case. Can you tell the committee what happened when you took that referral memo and shared it with one of those agents, specifically Supervisory Special Agent Number 1?
Okay, so we're going fast here, but FBI intelligence, the people at the top, the administrators, the executives on top, they've got this memo that has some pretty detailed information in it. We know that the people who are doing the actual work on the case, who are pursuing FISA warrants and investigating all this criminality, they don't have this memo yet that has the details that they might need.
We interviewed the first supervisor of the Crossfire investigation, operational person. We showed him the intelligence information. He indicated he had never seen it before.
Wow.
He immediately became emotional, got up and left the room with his lawyer, spent some time in the hallway, came back.
He was ticked off, wasn't he?
Yes.
He was ticked off because this is something he should have had as an agent on the case. It's important information that the director of the FBI kept from the people doing the investigation.
The information was kept from him.
Who's
Why?
Charles Dolan?
Why?
Charles Dolan is a public relations person here in Washington, D.C. He had prior involvement, professional involvement with Russian government, representing Russian government interests. He was a person that was associated with Igor Danchenko.
He was also buddies with the Clintons, wasn't he?
He had held positions when President Clinton was president.
In their
Wow.
campaign advisory to Secretary Clinton's presidential campaign, executive director of the Democrat Governors Association. That's the same Charles Dolan we're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. And wasn't he also a key source for information in the dossier?
He provided some information that was included in the
Ritz-Carlton
dossier, yes.
stuff, the Manafort
Clinton
stuff. In the Crossfire Hurricane
hack.
investigation and the Mueller
Funneled the
investigation,
info
when the
over.
FBI interviewed Mr. Dolan, what did he have to say?
To my knowledge, they didn't interview Mr. Dolan.
They didn't interview
They
this
did
guy?
not interview him.
Source for the dossier? Key information in the dossier? Buddies with the Clintons? They didn't talk to him?
No, I mean, we report on that because even Christopher Steele in October 2016 identified Dolan as somebody that might have information.
I find it interesting they didn't talk to him. Were there agents on the case who wanted to talk to Mr. Dolan, Mr. Durham?
Yes.
What happened to analyst number 1? She kept pushing to talk to Mr. Dolan. She was ultimately turned down. What happened to her the day that she was turned down? Said, no, we're not talking to Dolan. What happened to her?
At about the same time, she was assigned to a different project.
They moved her. They said, we can't have this. We can't have that. We can't be looking into the Clintons' buddy, a key source for the dossier. They reassigned her. And then what did she do?
She memorialized it.
She entered a memo to the file because she said, at some point the inspector general is going to want to know this information. I'm going to make it sure it's recorded temporaneously. She put it in the file. It's crazy. They didn't talk to the key source. They kept key intelligence from the investigators. That's how bad this investigation was. But here's the scary part. I don't think anything has changed.
No, of course
The day
not.
your report came out,
FBI said
5
we
weeks ago, May 15th, you got a
fixed
letter,
it all.
Mr. Durham, addressed to you from the general counsel at the FBI, Mr. Jason Jones, writes you this 6-page letter, and he says, not to worry, everything is fine. It's all been worked out at the FBI. He even says on page 2, he says, had the reforms implemented by current FBI leadership, summarized below, been in place in 2016, failures detailed in your report never would have happened, and he underlines it. He said this would never happen because of the reforms we implemented in 2019 and 2020. Then he says on page 4, one of the specific reforms, he says, FBI executive management has instructed investigations should be run out of the field and not from the headquarters. That statement is not true. 5 weeks ago, the FBI wrote you and said everything has changed when in fact it hasn't, and a statement in there is absolutely false, and we know it's false because 2 weeks ago today, we interviewed Stephen D'Antuono, former head of the Washington field office, Mr. Durham, and here's what he said in his transcript. Head of the Washington field office, when the Trump classified document investigation began, he said, that case was handled differently than I would have expected it to be, than any other cases handled. We learned a lot of stuff from Crossfire Hurricane, that headquarters should not work the investigation. It's supposed to be the field offices. My concern is that the Department of Justice was not following these principles. Nothing is, and that's the thing that scares me the most. Nothing has changed. Mr. Durham, I'm just finished with this. 60% of Americans now believe there's a double standard at the Justice Department. You know why they believe that?
Because there is.
There is.
There you go. Okay.
That has got to change. And I don't think more training, more rules is going to do it. I think we have to fundamentally change the FISA process.
Defund
and we have
them.
to use the appropriations process to limit how American tax dollars
go.
are spent at
There
the
you go.
Department of Justice.
Man, all right.
I yield back.
Jim Jordan and I are on the
And a
same
lady
page on
from
this one.
Texas.
Jim Jordan, who is the chairman of the committee, asking John Durham to fill in some of the gaps, but a lot of this stuff we already knew. We knew that these people were all in this big incestuous cabal, working with each other, funneling information around in order to further their political ends. And put this in the context of Hillary Clinton. She had her email problem, where she literally was sending classified email from a server that she created for herself. Trump is being prosecuted, had his whole house raided for classified documents. She had them in emails. She was sending emails from Wi-Fi on Xi Jinping's Wi-Fi network. So this was a big problem, but she didn't get raided or prosecuted for any of that. But as we unpack the layers of this thing, we now find out that Dolan and Igor and all of these people were in bed with the Clintons, basically. And the FBI took campaign funneled propaganda, disinfo. The FBI took it and ran with it, took it to the FISA courts and started spying on Trump's campaign. That's why Adam Schiff got censured, rightfully so. Absolutely embarrassing. I can't even think of other people who've been censured. Only Adam Schiff comes to mind because he got censured. And so here he is taking an attempt at asking John Durham some questions. It's the representative from California who just got censured Adam Schiff.
Mr. Durham, just so people remember what this is all about, let me ask you, the Mueller investigation revealed that Russia interfered in the 2016 election in sweeping and systemic fashion, correct? And Russia did so through a social media campaign that favored Donald Trump and disparaged Hillary Clinton, correct?
Report says yes.
And Mueller found that a Russian intelligence service hacked computers associated with the Clinton campaign and then released the stolen documents publicly. Is that right?
That report speaks for itself as well.
Mueller also reported that though
Trump
he could not
didn't do
establish the crime of conspiracy beyond a reasonable doubt, he also said, quote, a statement that the investigation did not establish certain facts does not mean there was no evidence of those facts. That also appears in the report, doesn't it?
There's language to that effect, yes.
In fact, you cited that very statement in your own report, did you not, as a way of distinguishing between proof beyond a reasonable doubt and evidence that falls short of proof beyond a reasonable doubt?
Correct.
As an illustration of this, both Mueller and congressional investigations found that Trump's campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, was secretly meeting with an operative linked to Russian intelligence named Konstantin Kilimnik, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And that Manafort, while chairman of the Trump campaign, gave that Russian intelligence operative the campaign's internal polling data, correct?
That's what I've read in the news, yes.
Internal polling.
And that Manafort provided this information to Russian intelligence while Russian intelligence was engaged in that social media campaign and the release of stolen documents to help the Trump campaign, correct?
You may be getting beyond depth of my knowledge, but
Yeah, he didn't work on
Well,
any of
let me
that.
say very simply, while Manafort, the campaign chairman for Donald Trump, was giving this Russian intelligence officer internal campaign polling data, Russian intelligence was helping the Trump campaign, weren't they?
I don't know that.
You really don't know
Sounds right.
those very basic facts of the investigation?
I know the general facts, yes. Do I know that particular fact myself? No. I mean, I know that I've read that in the media.
And are you aware, Mr. Durham, that Mueller and congressional investigations also revealed that Don Jr. was informed that a Russian official was offering the Trump campaign, quote, very high-level and sensitive information, unquote, that would be incriminating of Hillary Clinton and was part of, quote, Russia and its government support of Mr. Trump?
Sure, people get phone calls all the time
Yeah,
from
exactly
individuals who claim to have information like that.
Really,
Right.
the son of a presidential
Campaign.
candidate gets calls all the time from foreign government offering dirt on their opponent? Is that what you're saying?
We'd like to know. We have a question about that with old Hunty. He was getting a lot of phone calls from foreign people, including somebody on the board of Burisma, where he was getting paid $1 million a year, $80,000 a month for Lord knows what.
I think this is unique in your experience.
So you have other instances of the Russian government offering dirt on a presidential candidate to the presidential candidate's son. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know about that, but we've got allegations that Hunter Biden was bribed, essentially, that he got $5 million in order to push some policy changes on Daddy, who was vice president at the time, and then he made those changes. We know that happened. Adam?
Would you repeat the question?
You said that it's not uncommon to get offers of help from a hostile foreign government in a presidential campaign directed at the president's son. You really stand by that, Mr. Durham?
I'm saying that people
Hunter.
make phone calls making claims all the time that you may have
Are
experienced.
you really trying to diminish the significance of what happened here and
Yes.
the secret meeting that the president's son set up in Trump Tower to receive that incriminating information? Are you trying to diminish the significance of that, Mr.
I'm
Durham?
not trying to diminish it at all, but I think the more complete story is that they met and it was a ruse and they didn't talk about Mrs. Clinton.
Yeah, it was just a whole
And
dumb
you think
meeting.
it's insignificant that he had a secret meeting with a Russian delegation for the purpose of getting dirt on Hillary Clinton, and the only disappointment expressed in that meeting was that the dirt they got wasn't better. You don't think that's significant?
I don't think that was a well-advised thing to do.
Not well advised.
Right.
Wow, that's the understatement of the year.
No, he should have joined the board. He shouldn't have met with them at Trump Tower. He should have joined the board of their energy company in Ukraine. That's what Don Jr. should have done. Or he should have, I don't know, flown over to China with Daddy on his vice presidential plane. Or he should have created a whole life of drugs and prostitution and other horrific things that people are alleging occurred that he chronicled and documented on a laptop. Maybe he should have done all of those things. He had a meeting with somebody who came in with oppositional research. Hillary Clinton faked it, created fake oppositional research. Schiff, this is about that. You're trying to blame Trump for sitting down and having a meeting and trying to pass that off as evidence. What you made up to happen, and that is not at all the truth.
So you think it's perfectly appropriate or maybe just ill-advised for a presidential campaign to secretly meet with a Russian delegation to get dirt on their opponent? You would merely say that's inadvisable?
If you're asking me would I do it, I hope I wouldn't do it, but it was not illegal.
You're allowed. Did Hillary have meetings?
Stupid, foolish, ill-advised.
With other
Well,
people?
it is illegal to conspire to get incriminating opposition research from a hostile government that is of financial value to a campaign. Wouldn't that violate campaign laws?
I don't know all those facts to be true.
Well, your report, Mr. Durham, doesn't dispute anything Mueller found, did it?
No, our object, our aim was not to dispute Director Mueller. I have the greatest regard, highest regard for Director Mueller. He's a patriot.
The only distinguishment between his investigation and yours is he refused to bring charges where he couldn't prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and you did. I yield back.
All right, that is the guy who just got censured in the United States Congress. What a total loser. The basic thrust of this is that they've got very little evidence behind their claims. There's a lot more evidence that they made it all up. So Schiff will just latch onto any little thing that he can, turn that into the evidence that he needs to justify his existence. But America knows better. That's why he got censured. All right, so Matt Gaetz is also a representative in Congress. He's also unhappy with the Durham report.
I agree with Mr. Biggs. You've given us testimony today that you're disappointed that the FBI didn't cooperate more, right? That was your testimony.
Said that.
Yeah, so we're disappointed too, but the difference is when regular folks do things that are wrong and unlawful, there's typically greater effort to try to get those people before a grand jury to utilize criminal process where appropriate, not for other purposes. And it's just like, oh, well, Bill Priestep, the guy who might have set this whole op in motion, he just didn't want to talk to you about certain things, and you were real accommodating to that.
That's okay,
and
no
then
problem.
Mifsud, the person who juices Papadopoulos to create this predicate that you find improper. You guys, did you ever know who his lawyer was, Mifsud's lawyer?
Talked to his lawyer in Europe. I don't know if
So wait, you could find the guy's lawyer, but you couldn't find him?
We contacted somebody that we knew had represented him as part of the effort to try to locate him.
And you got the lawyer. And then now you're sitting here in front of the judiciary saying you could find the guy's lawyer, but you couldn't effectuate the service of a subpoena because you couldn't find him?
Well,
Do you know
first
how
of all,
silly that sounds?
as you may or may not know, we wouldn't have authority to serve a subpoena overseas. The lawyer didn't know where Mifsud
why they
was.
go
He was in
overseas.
communication with him, but he claimed not to know where he was. And we were trying to arrange an opportunity to talk to Mifsud.
Did you take possession of 2 BlackBerry phones from Mifsud in any way?
There were phones that were provided to us by
So you could find the
Mifsud's
phones, but
lawyer.
not the guy.
Correct?
Do you see how silly this looks? Like you found the lawyer, you found the phones, but the actual dude who got ordered by Western intelligence to go start this thing you couldn't find? It's kind of laughable. It seems like more than disappointment. It seems like you weren't really trying to expose the true core of the corruption. That you were trying to go at it another way.
As we said in the report, and as I said in my opening remarks, we pursued the facts as best we could.
Well, how about
given
this
the tools
fact?
that we have?
Okay, how about this fact, Mr. Durham? The entire Mueller team does a hard reset on their Apple phone in synchronization to wipe away evidence.
Amazing.
Did you investigate that?
I've read that.
Well, why did you investigate it? Who gave the order on the Mueller team to wipe the phones?
Yeah, that was not something that we were asked to look at.
Outside
and we didn't
the
No,
scope.
that's not
Yeah.
true, Mr. Durham. That is not true because I'm holding the document that authorizes your activity, and it specifically says the investigation of Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the order that says that you're supposed to investigate these things. And so, like, whether it's the Mueller team, Mifsud, how about Azra Turk? Azra Turk, what's Azra Turk's real name? Do you know that?
I'm not going to be disclosing the names of FBI personnel that are otherwise unavailable.
But an FBI, so the FBI sends somebody to go honeypot George Papadopoulos. Who gave the order to do that?
I think that's beyond the scope of what's in the report.
It's literally the scope of what your charging order is.
Wow.
Who put it in motion? We get after it was put in motion, the FBI did a bunch of wrong and corrupt things. Totally understand. We're trying to deal with that. But when you are part of the cover-up, Mr. Durham, then it makes our job harder.
Wow.
Yeah, well, if that's your thought, I mean, there's no way of dissuading you from that. I can tell you that it's offensive and that the people who worked on this investigation have spent their lives trying to protect the people in this country.
Don't you get tired of hearing that? Every time we hear one of these people from the DOJ or from the FBI, it's the same stinking story. How dare you challenge me? They are so honorable. All right, look, we have seen time and time again investigations by the DOJ into the DOJ and into the FBI, and the FBI investigating themselves. They all investigate themselves and they find they did nothing wrong. And when we've got questions about their milquetoast, ultra bland, just phone it in investigations, they turn around. How dare you talk about our team this way? I do believe that there are good people at the DOJ, and I know that there are. And these people, I think, have a default status, which is to always believe that the DOJ and their teams and everybody they're working for are operating in good faith, and that everybody in the institution is a strong and good institution, because they've been there their entire lives. Special Counsel Durham, people like Bill Barr, Attorney General Garland, they have been in these institutions their entire lives, and so they can't possibly go against the institution. And what does that mean practically? I believe that they're doing this out of good faith or with malicious intent. Either way, the final result is the institution gets protected.
And pursue within the law what it is that we are authorized to do.
You tried 2 cases, lost both of them.
Yeah.
And then the one guilty plea you got, Kleinsmith is back to practicing law in Washington, D.C. today.
Nothing
That's
happened.
beyond my control.
Right, but the fact that you allowed that plea to occur, right, and then the punishment was insufficient, the fact that you didn't charge Andrew McCabe, you didn't convict the lying Democrats or the lying Russians, you didn't investigate Mifsud or the Mueller probe, even though, as we sit here today in black letter, that was your charge. Have you ever heard of the Washington Generals?
The Washington Generals, yes.
Yeah, and they're the team that basically gets paid to show up and lose, right?
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure that the players who exert blood, sweat, and tears don't view it that way, but you might.
I think they do. I think they do, because the job of the Washington Generals is to show up every night and to play the Harlem Globetrotters. And their job is to lose.
I'm sorry, I was thinking of a different thing.
Yeah, so their job is to lose. And I'm kind of wondering, and it just seems so facially obvious that it's not what's in your report that's telling, it's the omission, it's the lack of work you did. And for the people like the chairman who put trust in you, I think you let them down, I think you let the country down, and you are one of the barriers to the true accountability that we need.
Yeah, it's a giant book report, and that was our same commentary when we read through it. It's neat. It's a lot of nice information. Thanks for assembling it, John. Hopefully it was 4 years of nice work for you, and you woke up and sent a letter. Hey, we're investigating FBI corruption. Do you think you could come and testify? He responds, no, I'm not. I'm busy. So it is disappointing.
Do I get to respond to that or comment on that? Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've ever investigated a crime.
I don't know that you have. You didn't investigate these, Mr. Durham.
Yeah.
How
about Andy McCabe? Did you charge him? Did you investigate him?
Gentlemen, time has expired. The witness can respond, and then we'll move on to our last.
I don't know, sir, whether or not you've ever had occasion to try to investigate crimes under the rules and regulations and under the Constitution that we're bound by. We can gather evidence in particularly lawful ways. Can't charge people because we might think something we can.
Unless you're the FBI, what do you mean gather evidence in lawful ways? You mean like creating fake FISA warrants and going to a FISA court? Creating fake dossiers and then going and submitting those to judges? You mean like that? That's what the FBI did. And that's what U.S. attorneys were doing in colluding with that. The FBI didn't just walk up to the DOJ and submit a form. They were working with the DOJ to get these warrants. They are working together on all of this stuff.
You didn't investigate. You didn't investigate the Mueller team wiping their phones, and you won't tell us who gave the orders because you're protecting those people.
Gentlemen's time has expired.
Brutal. Give Matt Gaetz some more time. We want to hear more from him because that was great. And it's exactly right. There's some good information that came out in the Durham report, but it's exactly what you'd expect. He delivered exactly what he wanted to deliver. It provides some explanation, but no consequence. And we want consequence. We'll see if Congress likes his answers and if they do anything with it in the time to come.